We've all heard people talk about raising the bar, aiming higher, pushing for more. But let's be honest. Most of the time, those words sound like noise, motivational fluff that feels good for a moment, but fades the second life gets hard again. That's because we're so focused on the results we want, we forget what actually drives those results. It's not the goals we write down in a notebook. It's not the vision board on our wall. It's not even the habits we try to build every January. It's our standards. Your standards are the invisible lines that define what's acceptable in your life and what isn't. They shape what you tolerate. They determine how you respond when things get tough. And they dictate the energy, effort, and urgency you bring to everything you do. But here's the catch. Standards are subtle. They're often unspoken. You won't hear someone say out loud, I have a standard of always showing up late, or I have a standard of giving up when things don't go my way. But if you look at someone's patterns, their behaviors, the way they react under pressure, you'll see their standards loud and clear. Think about this. Two people are faced with the same challenge. One rises to it, adapts, pushes through. The other backs down, rationalizes, waits for things to get easier. What made the difference? It wasn't talent, it wasn't knowledge, it wasn't motivation, it was standards. One person had a standard of perseverance, the other had a standard of comfort. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your standards. And most people don't realize that their standards have been set not by choice, but by circumstance, by what they've grown used to, by what the people around them have modeled, by what's been good enough up until now. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine someone who always says, I want to be healthier. They buy the gym membership, download the meal plan, and tell their friends they're committed. But when life gets busy or stressful, they skip the workouts, they grab fast food, and they say, I'll start fresh on Monday. That person doesn't have a health problem. They have a standards problem. Their standard is, I take care of myself when it's convenient. Contrast that with someone whose standard is, I move my body every day no matter what. It's not about perfection, it's about identity. That person might not be a professional athlete, but because their standard is non-negotiable, their actions stay aligned, even when life gets messy. Standards work in every area of life. Your relationships, your work, your finances, your leadership. They are your personal code of conduct, the rules you live by, even when no one's watching. Now here's what's powerful. Standards can be changed. You don't have to be who you've always been. You can make a decision today that there are certain things you will no longer tolerate in your life, certain patterns you will no longer repeat, certain excuses you will no longer accept from yourself. And when you do that, everything begins to shift. It's not instant, it's not magical, but it is transformational, because the moment your standards change, your life starts to change in ways that goals alone could never accomplish. You stop settling for relationships that drain you. You stop making decisions based on fear. You stop playing small just to make other people comfortable. And you start acting like someone who matters because you believe you do. Here's what's critical to understand. Raising your standards doesn't mean becoming rigid, cold, or self-righteous. It means becoming clear. Clear about what you value, clear about what you expect from yourself, clear about the kind of life you want to build, and what you're no longer willing to sacrifice to keep the peace or play it safe. When you set a new standard, you're not making a wish. You're declaring a boundary. A boundary between who you've been and who you're becoming. It's like a thermostat. If you set your thermostat to 72 degrees and the temperature drops, the system kicks in to bring it back up. That's what happens when you raise your standards. You create a new default. And when life dips below that level, whether in how you're treated, how you show up, or how you perform, your internal system activates. You don't sit around and hope things get better. You do something. This is where confidence is born, not from affirmations, but from alignment. When your behavior reflects your values consistently, you begin to trust yourself. You begin to carry yourself differently. And people notice. They notice your presence, they notice your posture, they notice that you're not the same because you're not. You've changed the rules of engagement. And now the world around you begins to respond to the new standard you've set. Of course, it's not always easy. There will be friction. You'll disappoint people who are comfortable with the old you. You'll face resistance from the outside and from within, but that's the cost of growth. You can either pay the price of discomfort now or pay the price of regret later. And that choice begins with a simple but profound decision. What do I want my life to reflect? Because your life, your actual life, is a mirror of your standards. Not your intentions, not your aspirations, not your goals, your standards. So if you want to change your life, stop focusing on what you want. Start focusing on what you accept. Because the moment you decide that the old standard is no longer acceptable, you open the door to an entirely new way of being. You don't need a new plan, you need a new baseline. And once that baseline shifts, your life will never look the same again. There's a truth about life that many people don't want to hear, but it sits at the heart of every relationship, every opportunity, and every outcome you experience. You teach the world how to treat you. That's not a motivational phrase, it's not a self-help slogan, it's a principle. One that quietly shapes the way people engage with you, the way they speak to you, and the level of respect, trust, or disregard you receive. And the most sobering part? It's not the world's fault, it's yours. Now that's not about blame, it's about ownership. It's about realizing that the standards you set for yourself don't just impact your personal progress, they broadcast a signal to everyone around you. You are always teaching people what's acceptable by what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you reinforce. Think about the last time someone spoke to you in a way that didn't feel respectful. Maybe they dismissed your idea or cut you off, joked at your expense, or took advantage of your time. You walked away frustrated, maybe even hurt. But the more important question is, what did you do next? If you said nothing, changed nothing, reinforced nothing, then whether you meant to or not, you taught them that behavior was okay. Not because you wanted it, but because you didn't challenge it. And silence is a form of permission. We don't get what we want, we get what we accept. Every time, let's take this beyond personal relationships. In the workplace, if someone consistently delivers mediocre work and you do nothing, you teach them that mediocrity is acceptable. If you're a leader and you stay quiet when someone behaves unethically, you're not neutral. You're complicit. Your standards are being communicated whether you speak or not. But the reverse is also true. When you hold yourself to a higher standard, when you show up prepared, when you follow through on your word, when you demonstrate integrity, you don't just model better behavior, you elevate the room. You shift the energy, and eventually you attract people who match your standard or challenge the ones who don't. There's a quiet power in being consistent about who you are and what you expect. It builds a kind of gravity. People may not always agree with you, but they know where you stand. That consistency builds respect, even when it creates friction. And over time, it builds culture, whether in a team, a family, or a community. But let's be honest. Holding that line is hard, especially when you've gone years, maybe even decades, reinforcing the wrong lessons. When you've smiled through disrespect, when you've lowered your voice to keep the peace, when you've bent over backwards just to be liked or included. It's hard to suddenly wake up one day and say, enough, because there's risk in raising your standard. You might lose people, you might be labeled difficult or too much, but let's flip that for a moment. What's the cost of not raising it? What does it cost you to stay quiet when your voice matters? What does it cost you to allow chaos into your peace? What does it cost you to constantly shrink yourself to fit spaces you've outgrown? And the truth is, every time you choose comfort over clarity, you teach the world to overlook you, to underestimate you, to ignore the value you bring, and you begin to believe that maybe that's all you're worth. That's not humility, that's self-neglect. So how do you change it? You start by getting clear about who you are and what you value. You define your non-negotiables, not as rules for others, but as a promise to yourself. Because this isn't about controlling other people. It's about aligning yourself with the version of you that no longer settles. That clarity becomes your compass when you operate from it. You don't need to yell. You don't need to demand. Your energy shifts. Your decisions shift. Your presence shifts. And the world begins to adjust. Some people will leave, and that's okay. Let them. Because the goal isn't to be accepted by everyone. The goal is to be fully aligned with yourself. That kind of alignment isn't loud, but it is undeniable. It looks like the employee who no longer says yes out of fear, but speaks up with conviction. It looks like the friend who stops enabling toxic behavior and starts modeling boundaries with grace. It looks like the leader who leads by example, not by ego. You see, when you raise your standard for how you're treated, you're not just drawing a line, you're casting a vote for your own worth, a vote for what's right, a vote for the kind of world you want to build. One conversation, one boundary, one decision at a time. This is not about being perfect. It's about being principled. It's about understanding that how you let others treat you becomes a reflection of how you treat yourself. And once you treat yourself with dignity, with discipline, with deep self-respect, you set a tone that others either rise to or walk away from. Both are wins. Because what matters most isn't how many people like you. What matters is that the people who do like you, see you, respect you, value you, and treat you in a way that reflects the standard you've chosen. So if your life feels out of alignment, if your relationships feel heavy, your work feels thankless, your presence feels diminished, don't rush to fix the world around you. Start by asking, what have I been teaching people about me? Because the good news is, you can reteach them. You can model a new tone. You can raise your voice. You can raise the standard. And when you do, the world doesn't just shift around you, it shifts because of you. Because when you know how to guide your mind, you are no longer at the mercy of circumstance. You don't need the world to be quiet in order to find peace. You don't need everything to go right in order to feel steady. You carry your own center with you, not because your mind is silent, but because you've learned how to ride the wildness and still move forward. Imagine what's possible when your energy is no longer wasted on internal conflict. When you stop wrestling with your own thoughts and start directing them toward what matters, that's when creativity flows. That's when leadership sharpens. That's when relationships deepen. Because you're no longer reacting from fear, you're responding from purpose. The mind will never be completely still. It's not supposed to be. Just like the wild horse was never meant to live in a cage, your mind was never meant to be shut down. It was meant to be understood, respected, and guided. That's what control really is. Not a battle, but a partnership. And once you master that partnership, once you truly learn how to lead your mind, everything else becomes possible. The fear doesn't disappear, but it no longer decides. The doubt doesn't vanish, but it no longer leads. And the wild horse, it doesn't run wild anymore. It runs with you. Powerfully, purposefully, freely. And that is when the real journey begins. We live in a world that rewards comfort, fast answers, instant gratification, minimal resistance. Entire industries are built around making things easier, faster, more convenient. And that's not always a bad thing. Innovation matters. Progress matters. But somewhere along the way, we started confusing comfort with fulfillment. We began to believe that the path of least resistance is the one most worth taking. And that belief is quietly killing our potential. Comfort is seductive. It tells you everything's fine, even when it isn't. It whispers in your ear that you've earned the right to relax, to coast, to stay where it's safe. It convinces you that the effort, the friction, the tension you feel when stretching into something new is a sign to turn back, but it's not. That tension is growth in disguise. Growth never happens in the comfort zone, not real growth. Not the kind that changes your character, expands your vision, or rewires your belief about who you are and what you're capable of. That kind of growth only happens when something is at stake, when something is unfamiliar, when you're doing the thing that makes your stomach turn and your voice shake and your doubts scream a little louder than usual. It's easy to look at people who are thriving, whether in leadership, creativity, business, or purpose, and believe that they're just naturally confident, naturally disciplined, naturally gifted. But the truth most people don't see is that behind every confident step was a moment of discomfort they didn't run from. They were uncomfortable when they made the first cold call, uncomfortable when they fired someone for the first time. Uncomfortable when they stood on the stage or launched the product or said, I don't know how this will go, but I'm doing it anyway. What separates them isn't talent, it's a relationship with discomfort. They stopped seeing it as a threat, they started seeing it as evidence that they were playing in a new arena. You can't grow and stay comfortable at the same time. The two are incompatible. But many people try to build their lives around both. They say they want to lead, but they avoid conflict. They say they want to grow, but they stay surrounded by people who never challenge them. They say they want to succeed, but they keep choosing what's familiar over what's necessary. And then they wonder why nothing changes. It's not because they aren't capable. It's because their comfort is running the show. The human brain is wired to seek safety, to avoid pain, to conserve energy. And in the wild, that made perfect sense. But in life, it becomes a trap. Because anything that stretches you will first feel unsafe, not because it is, but because it's unknown. So we stay in the job we hate, in the relationship that's already ended, in the story that no longer reflects who we are, not because it's right, but because it's what we know. And what we know feels easier than stepping into what we don't. But here's the paradox. The longer you stay in comfort, the more it costs you. It costs you clarity. It costs you the sharp edge of who you could be if you were willing to feel the burn of discomfort long enough to grow through it. Ask anyone who's ever trained for a marathon, started a business, left a toxic environment, or done something that scared them. The discomfort was always part of the journey, and yet the most meaningful rewards were always waiting on the other side. Because discomfort isn't just part of growth. It's the proof of it. The gym hurts before it feels good. The hard conversation brings tension before it brings resolution. The first steps of change are awkward before they are empowering. Discomfort is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. And what's powerful is this: once you learn how to sit in discomfort without backing away, your tolerance grows, your standards rise. Your willingness to endure difficulty in pursuit of something meaningful becomes your superpower. You stop needing everything to feel good. You stop needing people to approve before you move. You stop avoiding the hard parts of growth because now you expect them. And that changes everything. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop hesitating and start leading. You stop surviving and start evolving. But that shift begins with a decision to stop using comfort as a measure of success. Because the goal isn't to live a life free of discomfort. The goal is to live a life that matters enough to be uncomfortable for. There's no version of leadership, of creativity, of legacy that doesn't come with a cost. But if you're paying with discomfort, you're on the right path. It means you care. It means you're stretching. It means you're no longer content with staying the same. And yes, you will lose some things along the way. You'll lose approval. You'll lose familiarity. You'll lose the illusion of certainty. But what you gain is far more valuable. You gain depth. You gain confidence. You gain the kind of self-respect that can't be manufactured, only earned. That's what's on the other side of discomfort. Not just results, but resilience. Not just achievement, but identity. A sense of who you are, forged in the fire of everything you thought would break you but didn't. So the next time you feel uncomfortable, don't rush to numb it, don't distract yourself or backpedal, lean in. Stay there, let it teach you something, because that moment, the one that feels the most uncertain, the most vulnerable, the most unlike you, is likely the moment that's reshaping you. Growth isn't found in the easy path, it's found just past the edge of what you think you can handle. And if you're willing to go there, even for a little while, your life won't just change, you will. There's a moment in everyone's life when they begin to realize that the life they're living doesn't quite reflect the person they believe they could be. It might show up as restlessness, a quiet frustration, a voice that says, "This isn't it." And when that moment comes, most people respond by trying to change something external, a job, a relationship, a habit. But the real transformation, the one that sticks, never starts on the outside. It starts with who you believe you are. And nothing shifts your identity faster than raising your standards. Most people don't think about standards as identity. They think about rules, routines, do's and don'ts. But standards are far more powerful than that. Standards are the internal agreements you've made with yourself about what's acceptable, what's expected, and what's non-negotiable. They are the invisible framework that shapes the kind of person you become. Raise your standards and you raise the level of responsibility you hold yourself to. But more than that, you change the story you're telling yourself about who you are. And over time, that story becomes your identity. Identity isn't fixed. It's not something you're born with and stuck with. It's shaped moment by moment by the choices you make, the values you live, and the lines you draw. It's shaped every time you choose discipline over excuses, integrity over convenience, courage over comfort. The moment you say, "This is who I am now," and follow it with consistent action, that's the moment identity begins to evolve. It's not just about doing better, it's about being different. Because when your standards rise, you start to see yourself differently. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You show up in rooms not trying to prove something, but to represent something. Think about it. When someone makes a decision to stop tolerating toxic relationships, they don't just change who they hang out with. They start to view themselves as someone who's worthy of peace, of respect, of mutual energy. That's identity. When someone commits to never missing a workout, not as punishment, but as a promise to their future, they stop seeing themselves as someone who tries to stay fit and start seeing themselves as an athlete in their own life. That's identity. And when a leader decides to stop chasing popularity and starts leading with principle, even when it's hard, they stop being a manager and start becoming a leader. That's identity. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not willpower, it's not motivation, it's not more information, it's alignment. It's whether your standards are aligned with the kind of person you're trying to become. Because if your standards say one thing but your behavior says another, you'll never feel at peace. You'll feel conflicted, stuck, like you're working hard but not getting anywhere. And that's because you're still operating from an identity you haven't fully outgrown yet. The real shift happens when your standards catch up with your potential. And this doesn't mean perfection, it doesn't mean being hard on yourself. It means being clear with yourself. It means saying, this is the kind of person I choose to be now, and backing that up with how you move, how you speak, how you treat people, how you treat yourself. You begin to play a different game, a longer game, one based on purpose, not pressure. But here's the hard part. Raising your standards will cost you. It might cost you the approval of people who benefited from the old you. It might cost you the comfort of routines that kept you small. It might cost you the illusion that change is easy, that growth is neat and tidy. But the cost of staying the same is always higher, always. It costs you pride, it costs you passion, it costs you the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are walking in alignment with your highest self, even when no one is watching. Because the truth is, the world will treat you according to the identity you project. If you walk through life unsure of your worth, apologizing for your existence, downplaying your voice, don't be surprised when the world mirrors that back to you. But if you raise your standard and begin to embody someone who is responsible, values-driven, grounded, honest, then you stop waiting for permission and start owning your space. That doesn't mean you'll always feel strong. But it means even when you feel uncertain, you act in alignment with your higher standard. That's the difference between people who talk about change and people who become the change. And identity isn't about a label, it's about ownership. It's about being so clear on what you stand for that no matter where you are, whether you're in a meeting, in a crisis, in a moment of pressure, you don't default to fear. You default to your standard. That's what leaders do, that's what fulfilled people do. They don't wait to feel ready. They operate from the identity they've already claimed even before the results show up. Because they understand this. Your identity always leads. Results follow identity, not the other way around. If you want better results, stop asking, what do I need to do? And start asking, who do I need to become? And who you become is directly connected to what you decide to no longer tolerate. in your attitude, in your discipline, in your environment, in your mindset. Because identity isn't built by one big decision, it's built by 1,000 small ones. The decision to wake up early even when it's hard, the decision to speak with kindness even when you're tired, the decision to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable, the decision to honor your own voice, especially when it goes against the crowd, those decisions add up. They shape how you see yourself, and eventually they shape how the world sees you. When you raise your standards, you raise your identity. And when your identity rises, your entire life begins to align with it. Not overnight, but inevitably, because your life will never rise above the story you believe about yourself. And that story gets written one decision, one standard, one choice at a time. It's a simple truth, but one that most people overlook. You don't get what you want, you get what you're willing to tolerate. That one shift in perspective can change everything. Because most people spend their lives chasing what they say they want, but never questioning what they've been tolerating along the way. People say they want respect, but they tolerate being overlooked. They say they want health, but they tolerate skipping their commitments to themselves. They say they want love, but they tolerate relationships that drain them. They say they want success, but they tolerate laziness, inconsistency, and distractions that pull them off course. It's easy to talk about what we want. It's easy to write it in a journal, to put it on a vision board, to say it out loud when we're feeling motivated. But none of those things will build a meaningful life unless they are backed by a decision. A decision about what you will no longer allow, because the results in your life right now, good or bad, reflect not just your goals, but your thresholds, your standards, your tolerances. Every time you accept less than you deserve, you reinforce the idea that less is okay, that less is normal, and life responds accordingly. You don't rise to the level of your dreams. You fall to the level of your habits, your patterns, your boundaries or lack of them. Think about the thermostat in your home. You set the temperature, and when it drops below that number, the heat kicks in. When it rises above it, the air conditioning starts. That's your tolerance setting, and your life works the same way. You have internal thermostats for respect, for money, for fitness, for fulfillment, for love. If your tolerance is low, the moment life dips, you accept it. You explain it away. This is just how things are. But if your tolerance is high, if you've raised your standard, then when things fall short, you respond, you act, you change something. That's the difference between people who drift and people who drive. But here's where it gets hard. Most people don't realize they've built their lives around tolerating. They've adapted to dysfunction. They've normalized disappointment. They've learned to live just beneath their potential because it's less risky than raising their hand and saying, I'm not okay with this anymore. And the longer you tolerate something, the harder it is to admit you've been tolerating it. Because doing so would mean confronting yourself. Not in a shameful way, but in a brutally honest way. It means asking, what have I been putting up with that's keeping me from becoming who I say I want to be? It could be procrastination, it could be self-doubt, it could be the way you let your time get hijacked by things that don't matter. It could be the way you silence your voice when it's time to speak truth. Whatever it is, the first step to change isn't a new goal, it's a new intolerance. That might sound like a harsh word, intolerance, but sometimes it takes a strong rejection of the status quo to wake you up. It takes a moment where you say no more. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect, out of alignment, out of knowing that the gap between your reality and your potential isn't due to a lack of vision, it's due to what you've been willing to live with. You don't change your life by wanting more, you change your life by refusing less. That means creating new thresholds, new baselines. It means saying, I no longer tolerate being the last priority in my own schedule. I no longer tolerate letting fear decide for me. I no longer tolerate excuses dressed up as reasons. I no longer tolerate people who violate my peace. And once that shift happens, once you stop tolerating things that drain you, something amazing begins to happen. Your capacity expands. You start noticing opportunities that were always there, but that you were too exhausted, too distracted, or too numbed out to see. You start attracting people who mirror the new version of you. You start getting momentum, not because you added anything new, but because you finally removed what was in the way. But this isn't about becoming rigid or cold. It's not about cutting people off without compassion or pushing yourself without rest. It's about raising your awareness, about realizing that tolerance is not always a virtue. Sometimes it's the very thing that's keeping you small. You get what you settle for, always, in relationships, in business, in how you treat your body, in how you use your voice. And settling doesn't always look like giving up. Sometimes it looks like going along, shrinking a little, staying quiet, telling yourself, it's not that bad. But if you had to keep telling yourself it's not that bad, that's already a sign it's not that good, and you deserve better. Not because someone said so, not because it's owed to you, but because you have the power to choose. You have the power to raise your minimums, to change what you allow, to decide that anything less than the life you were built for is no longer welcome at your table. And yes, when you do that, things will shift. People might resist. Your old habits will push back. You'll be tempted to lower the bar again because it's easier. But the version of you on the other side of that decision, the one who stands taller, thinks clearer, loves deeper, leads better, that version is worth the discomfort of letting go. You don't get what you want, you get what you tolerate. So if you want more, become someone who refuses to tolerate anything less. Because the moment you stop settling is the moment everything else starts rising to meet you.